Imagine this. You're in the remote hills of northeast India, somewhere between the dense forests of Manipur and the misty heights of Mizoram. A quiet tribe is gathered in a circle, not speaking the local language, but singing something ancient. Hebrew prayers rise into the mountain air. The Sabbath is observed. Traditions, centuries old, are still alive. But this isn't a Jewish community from Jerusalem or even New York. This is a tribe that claims they've been wandering for 2,700 years, and they say they're the children of Manasseh, one of the 10 lost tribes of Israel. And here's where it gets wild. The government of Israel agrees. Yes, you heard that right. After generations of being tucked away in the shadows of history, a people group known as the Bnei Menashe, literally, sons of Manasseh, is stepping back onto the stage of prophecy. Their journey, their heritage, their identity, it's all pointing to something way bigger than a cultural reunion. Some believe this might be the literal fulfillment of a prophecy, playing out right in front of us. Let's rewind for a second. Most of us are familiar with the 12 tribes of Israel, descendants of Jacob's sons scattered across the ancient Promised Land. But after the reign of King Solomon, things fell apart. The nation split in two, a south kingdom, Judah and Benjamin, and a northern kingdom made up of 10 other tribes, Manasseh among them. And then came the year 722 BC. That's when the mighty Assyrian Empire stormed in, and they didn't just conquer, they scattered. The 10 northern tribes, including Manasseh, were uprooted and cast across the known world. That's where history goes quiet. The tribes vanished, disappeared, lost to time. Most scholars assumed they were absorbed into other nations, never to be found again. But what if they didn't disappear? What if some of them kept moving, journeying from Samaria to Persia, from Persia to Tibet, and then deeper into Asia? That's exactly what the Bnei Menashe claim. They speak of an ancestral cave called Shinlung, a stopping point during their epic migration. According to them, it's not just a legend, it's a memory. And here's the mind-blowing part. Their traditions weren't copied from books. They weren't introduced by missionaries. These were oral stories told from grandfather to grandson, stretching back across centuries. Tales of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, songs about crossing the Red Sea, festivals that line up shockingly well with ancient Levitical law. It's as if they didn't learn about Israel, they remembered it. So why Manasseh? Of all the tribes that vanished, why is this one making a comeback? To answer that, you have to go back to the story of Joseph, the son who was sold into slavery in Egypt, only to rise to power and save nations during a famine. While in Egypt, Joseph had 2 sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. But when Joseph brought them to his dying father, Jacob did something unexpected. He adopted them both, officially, blessing them alongside his own sons. That move gave Manasseh a share in the inheritance of Israel. In fact, Joshua records that the tribe of Manasseh received land on both sides of the Jordan River, a double portion, a unique legacy. But the most stunning part? The book of Revelation names Manasseh as one of the 12 tribes that will be sealed in the end times, specifically among the 144,000. Wait, sealed? Let's hold that thought for later. For now, fast forward from ancient times to the 1950s. In northeast India, a tribal leader has a dream, a vision. He sees a land flowing with milk and honey, a place his people once called home. He doesn't even fully understand what he's seen until Christian missionaries show up in the region with Bibles translated into the local language. But what happened next was not what the missionaries expected. Instead of the tribes converting to a new religion, something incredible happened. They recognized the stories. The Torah festivals matched their own. The customs they'd been preserving for generations reflected temple practices from ancient Israel. And the songs they sang, laced with Hebrew. It wasn't a conversion, it was a confirmation. And in 2005, something even more astonishing took place. Israel's chief rabbi officially recognized the Bnei Menashe as descendants of the lost tribe of Manasseh. After 2,700 years in exile, they weren't just a curious tribe from India anymore. They were being welcomed home. But this was more than bureaucracy. It was a prophetic marker. It was as if an ancient clock had started ticking again. But just when the dream seemed within reach, disaster struck. In May 2023, the region erupted in violence. Ethnic clashes tore through the hills of northeast India, and the Bnei Menashe were caught in the crossfire. Their synagogues burned. Sacred Torah scrolls, handwritten over generations, were turned to ash. Leaders fled. Lives were lost. It was a nightmare scenario. A community that had survived for millennia suddenly faced extinction in a matter of days. But that's not where the story ends, because this isn't just about one tribe. What's happening in India is part of a much larger pattern, one that's stretching across the globe and shaking prophetic foundations.
What if I told you what's happening in India isn't a one-time event? That the Bnei Menashe returning to Israel is just the beginning of something much, much bigger. All over the world, scattered communities are beginning to stir, rediscovering ancient identities and realizing they may belong to the very tribes that once disappeared from history. Let's start with Ethiopia. In the 1980s and 90s, a series of daring rescue operations known as Operation Moses and Operation Solomon airlifted thousands of Ethiopian Jews, called Beta Israel, back to their ancestral homeland. These weren't conversions, these were returns. Families who had kept their faith alive for centuries in the mountains and deserts were finally coming home. And the pattern didn't stop there. In Spain and Latin America, descendants of crypto-Jews, those who were forced to hide their Jewish identity during the Inquisition, are reclaiming their roots after over 500 years of silence. In Nigeria, the Igbo community has long claimed Jewish ancestry, and modern genetic research is beginning to back them up. In China, isolated communities in Kaifeng have practiced Jewish traditions for over 1,000 years. And in Afghanistan, the remnants of ancient Jewish tribes have had to be evacuated under life-threatening conditions. The stories are spread across continents, but they all seem to echo the same prophetic rhythm: a return, a regathering, a fulfillment. You can look at a map and draw the connections: Ethiopia to India, Spain to China, Nigeria to Afghanistan. It's like watching puzzle pieces slide back into place after centuries of being scattered across the earth. Coincidence or prophecy? Let's go back to what Ezekiel said in chapter 36, verse 24. "For I will take you from the nations, gather you from all the lands, and bring you into your own land." But don't stop there. The very next verse takes it deeper. "Moreover, I will give you a new heart and put a new spirit within you." You see, it's not just about physical return. It's about spiritual renewal. The regathering of the tribes isn't just a geopolitical event. It's a divine awakening. The heart is being transformed along with the homeland. And that's what the Apostle Paul was talking about in Romans 11 when he wrote about the mystery of Israel. He said, "A partial hardening has happened to Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles has come in, and so all Israel will be saved." Let that sink in. Paul isn't talking about something symbolic here. He's describing an actual process, a prophetic timeline where exiled tribes are returning, hardened hearts are softening, and the scattered are being made whole again. And if that sounds dramatic, wait until you hear what Revelation says next. In chapter 7, John sees a vision of the end times. Angels are holding back destruction, waiting for one thing: the sealing of 144,000 people. These aren't random believers. They're named, 12,000 from each tribe of Israel. And yes, Manasseh is one of them. But here's the twist: The tribe of Dan is missing, gone, omitted from the list. Now we'll dive deeper into that mystery in part 4, but for now, let's focus on what this sealing means and why it matters so much. First off, the term sealed comes from a Greek word that means to mark something as private, protected, or set apart. In ancient times, a seal showed ownership or authority. In Revelation, the sealed ones are marked on their foreheads, not with a visible stamp, but with God's spiritual signature, His name, His claim. Revelation 14:1 says, "Then I looked, and there before me was the Lamb, standing on Mount Zion, and with him 144,000 who had His name and His Father's name written on their foreheads." These aren't just faithful, they're chosen, set apart. And if you look closely, the text tells us exactly who they are. 12,000 from Judah, 12,000 from Reuben, 12,000 from Gad, 12,000 from Asher, 12,000 from Naphtali, 12,000 from Manasseh, 12,000 from Simeon, 12,000 from Issachar, 12,000 from Zebulun, 12,000 from Joseph, 12,000 from Benjamin. That's 144,000 individuals, and they're not like Israel, they are Israel. This is where a lot of modern theology gets tangled up. Some interpret the 144,000 as symbolic of the entire church, but Revelation is very specific here. Tribal names, exact numbers, and ethnic identity. These aren't metaphors, they're messengers. So why are they being sealed? Because something big is coming. The sealing happens after the 6th seal is opened in Revelation, after global upheaval, war, famine, and chaos have shaken the earth. The 4 angels are holding back even more destruction until these individuals are marked. They're being protected for a reason. They're being set apart for a mission. And that mission ties directly to the return of tribes like the Bnei Menashe. Is it possible that some of these returning communities will be part of the 144,000? That among those climbing onto plains from the hills of India or the mountains of Ethiopia are people who have been divinely preserved for such a time as this? We can't say for sure, but the signs are pointing in a very compelling direction.
So now we know. The 144,000 aren't just some symbolic group representing all believers. The book of Revelation gives us names, tribes, numbers, 12,000 from each. And Manasseh? He's right there in the list, front and center. But here's the deeper question. Who exactly are these people? Let's turn to Revelation 14. It paints a powerful image. 144,000 standing on Mount Zion with the Lamb. But then it adds something that really throws people for a loop. These are the ones who have not been defiled with women, for they are celibate. These are the ones who follow the Lamb wherever he goes. They have been purchased from among men as first fruits for God and the Lamb. That's incredibly specific. Now, some folks get stuck on the celibacy part, but remember, this isn't just about physical abstinence, it's about spiritual purity. In biblical terms, being defiled often referred to idolatry, compromise, or covenant unfaithfulness. So when Revelation says they're celibate, it could be emphasizing their loyalty, their spiritual integrity. These are people who haven't bowed to the systems of the world. They haven't been seduced by false religions or corrupt powers. They're pure, set apart, unwavering in their devotion to God. They're not just protected, they're assigned. They're witnesses. They are the first fruits, a term used throughout Scripture to describe the first and best of the harvest, the part that belongs solely to God. That means the 144,000 are a kind of spiritual down payment, a preview, a declaration that God hasn't abandoned Israel. In fact, He's sealing His people to use them in the most critical moment in human history.
So what exactly is their purpose? Here's what the text hints at. They're going to survive the tribulation. They'll be protected through judgment, preserved in chaos, and possibly used as divine messengers during the darkest hours on earth. They're not hiding, they're active. They're marked by God not just to be spared, but to serve. Let's look at the timeline. Revelation 7 shows that the sealing of the 144,000 happens after 6 seals have already been broken, each one unleashing chaos on earth. False messiahs and deception, war and conflict, famine and scarcity, death and plague, martyrdom and persecution, cosmic signs, earthquakes, darkness, and fear. And just before the 7th seal unleashes God's judgment, the 144,000 are sealed. Revelation 7:3 says, "Do not harm the earth or the sea or the trees until we seal the bondservants of our God on their foreheads." It's like the calm before the storm, a sacred moment where God marks his own, his faithful, before judgment is poured out. And what exactly does the seal mean? Well, it's not a physical stamp or visible tattoo. The Greek word used here means to set a private mark. Think of it like a king's signet ring, a stamp of ownership and protection. In Roman times, a sealed scroll could only be opened by someone with the proper authority. If the seal was broken, you knew something was tampered with. In the same way, God is placing his seal on these individuals to declare, "These are mine, do not touch." The sealing isn't new either. In the Old Testament, God protected his faithful in similar ways, like the mark on the foreheads of the righteous in Ezekiel 9 during Jerusalem's destruction, or the blood on the doorposts in Egypt that spared the Israelites during Passover. Sealing is a pattern of preservation. So who are these 144,000? They're ethnically Jewish, they're divinely chosen, they're spiritually pure, they're sealed for protection, they're servants, witnesses, and warriors of light in a time of darkness. And remember, Manasseh is one of them. That's what makes the return of the Bnei Menashe so profound, because for centuries they were considered lost, forgotten, hidden in the mountains of India. And yet here they are, re-emerging at the exact moment the world seems to be entering unprecedented spiritual and geopolitical shaking. Now, you might be wondering, why is this so important? Because it proves that God never forgets. Through all the wars, exiles, persecutions, and migrations, he preserved identities, he protected lineages, he planted his people in the most unexpected places so that one day, at the appointed time, they would rise. And now they are. The fact that we're seeing tribes return isn't just a headline, it's a prophetic moment. It's the unfolding of a divine plan that's been moving steadily forward for over 2,000 years. But there's still one major mystery left to solve. Why is Dan, the tribe of Dan, missing from the list in Revelation? Every other tribe is mentioned. Even Joseph gets a slot. But Dan? Nowhere to be found? And some scholars believe that omission might be tied to something dark, something that goes all the way back to ancient idolatry, and possibly even to the Antichrist himself.
So we've talked about the 144,000, who they are, why they're sealed, and what role they might play in the end times. But now let's address the elephant in the room, the missing tribe. In Revelation chapter 7, we're given a detailed list, 12,000 sealed from each tribe of Israel. But one name is conspicuously absent, Dan. Why? Why is Dan, one of Jacob's original 12 sons, completely left out while every other tribe, including the forgotten Manasseh, is named and sealed? Well, some theologians have an intriguing theory, and it's not for the faint of heart. Let's go back to the Old Testament. Dan had a troubled history. In Judges 18, the tribe of Dan introduced idolatry into Israel. They didn't just worship idols, they set up a rival religious center with their own version of the priesthood. It was spiritual rebellion at the national level, and that act would leave a deep stain on their legacy. Fast forward to prophetic writings, like Jeremiah 8:16, which says, "The snorting of his horses was heard from Dan. At the sound of the neighing of his stallions, the whole land quaked." It's a cryptic warning. Many scholars interpret this as a hint at destruction or invasion coming from Dan's territory. Then there's Daniel 11:37, speaking about a future figure, the Antichrist. He will show no regard for the gods of his ancestors or for the desire of women, nor will he regard any god, but will exalt himself above them all. Now, while Dan isn't mentioned by name in that verse, some early church fathers and Jewish sages believed that the Antichrist would come from the tribe of Dan, linking this idea back to Dan's history of apostasy. Could that be the reason Dan is left out? It's possible. Revelation doesn't explain why, but what we do see is a direct correlation between faithfulness and sealing. The 144,000 are described as spiritually pure, faithful to the Lamb, marked for a divine mission. Dan's long association with spiritual rebellion could have disqualified the tribe from this prophetic honor. Now, is Dan forever rejected? That's a different question. God's faithfulness spans generations. His mercy is unmatched, and even though Dan isn't listed among the 144,000, the tribe isn't erased from Scripture. Ezekiel 48, which talks about the division of the land during the millennial kingdom, includes Dan again, at the very top of the list. So, while Dan may be excluded from the sealing of Revelation 7, the door of redemption is never fully closed. And that brings us full circle, because when we look at the return of the Bnei Menashe, when we trace their journey from Samaria to Persia, Tibet, and finally northeast India, we see something truly profound. Not one tribe has been forgotten. Think about that. Across 2,700 years of history, through the rise and fall of empires, through exile, pogroms, genocide, and global scattering, God never let their identity fully die out. He kept them hidden, preserved, remembered. In the mountains of India, in the highlands of Ethiopia, in the lost alleys of Spain, in the silent hills of Nigeria, in the shadows of Afghanistan, even in the ancient quarters of China. And now, they're coming home. The same God who made promises to Abraham, the one who told him his descendants would be as numerous as the stars, is proving right now, in our generation, that not a single promise has been forgotten. He told David his throne would be eternal. He told Jeremiah there would be a new covenant. He told Ezekiel the dry bones would rise. He told Isaiah the banished would return from the four corners of the earth. And it's happening. Every returning tribe, every rediscovered lineage, every prophetic restoration is a loud declaration of divine faithfulness. That's not just history unfolding, it's heaven's fingerprints all over the timeline of mankind. And here's where it gets personal. If God is this faithful to a scattered tribe hidden in the hills of India, if He remembered them after 27 centuries, if He preserved their customs, their language, their longing, then what does that say about His promises to you? Because here's the truth. If God can gather nations, He can gather your broken pieces. If He can preserve tribes across millennia, He can preserve your faith through any storm. If He keeps every covenant to the letter, He will keep His promises to your heart. You are not forgotten. Your prayers are not unheard. Your pain is not wasted. Every step of the return of the lost tribes is a prophetic whisper. If I was faithful to them, I will be faithful to you. So what now? We are witnessing prophecy unfolding in real time. The return of Manasseh may very well be one of the most significant signs of our generation. But there's still more to come. The mystery of Dan is still open. The sealing of the 144,000 may be closer than we think. The stage is being set. But here's the question. Are you watching? Isaiah 11:12 says, "He will lift up a standard for the nations and assemble the banished ones of Israel, and will gather the dispersed of Judah from the four corners of the earth." The tribes are returning, the prophecies are fulfilling, and the final act is drawing near. So what do you think the return of Manasseh means for the future? Are we standing at the edge of a new prophetic era? Could we be seeing the prelude to the end times events? Let's talk about it in the comments, because one thing's for sure, the best is yet to come.